Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about industry analysis and specifically looking at the five forces. The five forces model was developed by this dude, Professor Michael Porter of Harvard Business School, also evil genius, and I'll talk about why I think he's an evil genius. And he wrote this book in 1980 called Competitive Strategy, and it basically reshaped not just the research of strategy, but the entire discipline of management. And it really was a pivotal idea in the history, the academic approach of management, and it's reshaped management philosophy ever since then. If you're going to read one book in the management oeuvre, then I would highly encourage it to be Competitive Strategy. It is an enlightening book, although incredibly dry and boring. The five forces model essentially says that there are five forces that determine how the value in an industry, which I represent here, that circle is all the value that exists within an industry, the return on investment that exists within an industry. How is that split up amongst the different players in the industry? And according to Porter, there are five forces that influence this. The first is the power of sellers. And when we talk about sellers, what we mean by that is businesses, companies, firms, competitors, the people that are trying to devise strategy. If you own a business, you'd be the seller. That's what we mean by sellers. The next force that influences how this value is split up is the bargaining power of buyers. Buyers are customers, consumers. When you go to the grocery store, you are a buyer. When you buy a car, you are a buyer. Next, we have the bargaining power of suppliers. And suppliers are the people that provide resources, technology, labor. And then we have the threat of new entrants. And new entrants are entrepreneurs, innovators, startups, anyone that's not currently in the industry but could be. And then also the threat of substitutes. And substitutes are alternative products and services. They don't do the exact same thing as the product or service in the industry, but they do something kind of similar. And so buyers have the option of going to substitutes. Now, Michael Porter was getting a dual degree in both economics and management at Harvard, and his colleagues in the economics department were doing research on how do you design government policy in such a way to maximize competition within an industry. Because when people talk about capitalism and all the benefits of capitalism, it's all about competition, right? It's competition that provides efficiency, productivity, innovation. So if we want to create the most value for our society, if we want to create the most value, especially for buyers, which is you and me, then we need to create the perfectly competitive industry. And economists were talking about how do we design industries so they're super, super competitive. And what they came to was this conclusion, that a perfectly competitive industry looks like this. We have buyers, sellers, and suppliers all getting a pretty equal share of the pie. There's a lot of sellers in the industry, and they're not very powerful. So they're all about the same power. They're all jockeying for position. They're all fighting each other. Suppliers are more concentrated and more powerful than sellers. And then buyers are the most concentrated and the most powerful. And so buyers are, because they're concentrated, because they're powerful, they're able to play sellers off against each other and make sure they're getting the value that they deserve. The other thing about the industry is that it has these permeable borders. So it's really easy for new entrants to come in and challenge existing sellers. So if existing sellers in the market, or their prices are too high, they're not delivering the quality or the functionality that buyers want, then it's really easy for entrepreneurs to step in and start competing with them. On the other side, you'll also notice it's really easy for buyers to leave the industry and go to substitutes. And then finally, it's really easy for suppliers to sell directly to buyers, something we call forward integration. So if sellers ever get a little bit too greedy, a little bit lazy, we have these powerful suppliers that can step into the industry and start selling directly to buyers. And in that way, they act as a check on the power of sellers. And so this is what a perfect industry looks like to economists, where you have a lot of sellers competing against each other. You have powerful suppliers that act as a credible threat against those sellers if they start to take too much of the value for themselves. You have a credible threat of new entrants to come in and challenge existing businesses, existing sellers. The buyers are concentrated and relatively powerful, and if they ever don't like what's going on in the industry, they've got a lot of other substitutes that they can go to, and it's really easy to do that. Now, why I call Michael Porter Evil Genius Michael Porter is because he took research that was designed specifically for the public good, to try and to be used to try and create the most value for society, to empower buyers and suppliers and against sellers and keep everything a fair playing field. And he took that research and he turned it on its head. And he said, businesses can use this to design strategy in order to structure industries in a way so that sellers get the most power. And so this is what Michael Porter sees as the perfect industry. We still have buyers, suppliers, and sellers. Sellers are getting a much bigger chunk of the return on investment in an industry. How are they doing this? Well, first of all, there's only a few sellers, and they're very powerful, and they're not equally powerful. You have one clear leader in the industry, and then maybe a couple other hanger-ons, but it's a concentrated seller industry with a clear power dynamic. Suppliers, on the other hand, are weak, and they're less concentrated than the sellers. So there's more suppliers than there are sellers. And the same thing with buyers. There's a lot of very weak buyers, so sellers can play them off each other. As you can see, there's very high borders around this industry, so it's really hard for new entrants to come in and challenge existing sellers. And it's really difficult for buyers to get out of the industry and use substitutes. And then finally, it's really hard for suppliers to forward integrate and sell directly to buyers. And so for sellers, this is what the perfect industry looks like. And this is essentially Michael Porter's plan or model. He took the public policy research that economists were doing on how to make the most competitive industry and pivoted to how businesses can use that information to make an industry, to structure an industry that is most effective for them. One thing I want you to be really aware of is that we're talking about an industry level analysis. So the industry, all the sellers are in the same industry, right? This isn't an analysis that is unique to each business. It's an analysis which is unique to the industry as a whole.